Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network, Grung. I'm Asbet Bedrosyan. In this Conversations on Grung episode, Hovik Manucharyan and I are going to discuss a number of legal and human rights developments in and around Armenia. This episode was recorded on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022.
Over the past few months, certain developments have put us on alert about the state of human rights in Armenia in light of the government's appointment of a new HR ombudsman and the persecution and harassment of opposition candidates who won local elections. On another front, we wanted to follow up on the legal battle between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And finally, a new constitutional commission has been selected to, yes, you guessed it, yet again, to change the constitution of the Republic of Armenia to suit the needs of the ruling party. And to discuss these issues, we have with us Ruben Melikyan, who was formerly Artsakh's human rights ombudsman. And prior to that, he was a rector of the Justice Academy of Armenia, training many of the Armenian jurists that are in the forefront today. In 2019, Melikyan co-founded and currently leads the Path of Law NGO, Իրավական, ուղի in Armenian. Hello and welcome back to our show, Ruben. We appreciate your time.
Hello, Ruben.
Thank you, Asbet. Thank you, Hovik. Thank you for inviting me. And I also would like to cheer all our people who listen to us. And I think we will have very interesting discussion because the topics are really very important for current Armenia.
Yeah, thank you. Great to have you. Okay, a couple of months back, early in December 2021, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, issued urgent decisions in the case that were brought to it by Armenia. The decisions ordered both Armenia and Azerbaijan to, quote-unquote, take all necessary measures to prevent the incitement and promotion of racial hatred against each other's nationals. Additionally, the decision said that Armenia must protect from violence and harm all persons captured in relation to the 2020 conflict who remain in detention, and must prevent and punish acts of vandalism and desecration affecting Armenian cultural heritage. Ruben, can you explain what Armenia's suit was all about and what the decisions mean for us?
Well, we can talk about this decision for very long. We can also talk about why we went to ICJ, why we didn't go to ICJ some years ago. But I think that our audience will not like that discussion, so I will be not very long for this. First, just several notions. First, unlike European Court of Human Rights, ICJ draws a line of equality between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Mm-hmm. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous. Unlike ECHR, in ECHR we had some important cases, including the case on, I hope all of us remember the case of our lieutenant who was killed by Azerbaijani military, Ramil Safarov.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I believe that all of us remember Gurgen Markaryan. So in that case, back in 2018, European Court of Human Rights was very strict, and it was not a case which says the same things to both parties. Then we had other decisions as well, judgments as well. I believe that this case is important, of course, and very prominent people from diaspora, including my friend Garni Kerkonyan, are included in the case. But I'm afraid this case also will bring a kind of equality between Armenia and Azerbaijan on the issue of treating the nationals of each other, which is not fair.
Mm-hmm. False parity.
Yeah. Why? Because if we draw the parallels between how we behave towards Azerbaijani nationals and how Azerbaijan behaves towards Armenian nationals, that's a way a big distinction, That's a big distinction. In Azerbaijan's case, that's a state-sponsored Armenophobia policy.
Right.
State policy, which is in the roots of Azerbaijani statehood as well as it is. We cannot say that there is a kind of equality.
Yes.
But ICJ, in some way, and we were afraid, and now our predictions unfortunately came true, tries to draw lines of equality between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
So it was a little bit of a political decision rather than just a legal justification decision.
I'm sorry, it's very important to say that that's not the final decision. This is an interim decision, and we should be afraid of the final decision, which could bring what I'm saying to the reality. On the other hand, maybe we could not have other chance other than to go to ICJ, because we didn't have any other choice.
Right. Well, so my impression is that anytime Armenia files a suit and has a grievance, immediately Azerbaijan will file a countersuit, an equal and opposite. I call it an equal and opposite suit, so that they can make it a situation of he said, she said, so that these Western judges, Western courts, basically throw up their hands and say, well, these people have various ethnic grievances. We don't know who's right, who's wrong, and they issue these. Both sides are equal kind of a statement. So with such decisions, do you think that these decisions help protect our people and our heritage from gross violations?
No, unfortunately, it's not any guarantee. It doesn't give any guarantee for protecting our people, because we know that in international relations, interests are much more important, way more important than law. And if we try to see what is happening now in international politics, for example, in Russia, if Russia, all the case with Navalny, you remember what a huge problem started from his apprehension, his detention, and so on.
Yes.
Everybody in Europe and in international community and human rights people were talking about it. But during 44 days war, on online regime, Azerbaijani soldiers not killing, but torturing and humiliating our soldiers, beheading our people, and everybody was mute. In international human rights community. So I don't have any expectation that this kind of decisions can bring us any percent of protection.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say that Pashinyan is politically intimidated by Aliyev right now in many ways. My concern is, can Azerbaijan use similar tactics to coerce Armenia on the legal front? Meaning that, would it be possible to politically influence Armenia and also basically achieve what they want using politics and military? Like, for instance, right now, what's stopping Pashinyan from saying, we're now in the era of peace, and therefore we're not going to pursue one case versus another, in the ECHR, and we're going to drop all charges. Do you see any threat of that?
Yes, I have that feeling that one day Pashinyan will go live on his Facebook page and say, you know what, we are for a long time battling in legal chambers, and now we think that we need to make our first step and step back from that cases. He can do that. It's totally possible. Although I would say that the team which deals with it is a professional one, and I believe that at least majority of them are people who have national dignity.
Okay.
At least majority of them. Yeah. As soon as we have Pashinyan as a head of government, what you just described is possible.
The reason that I ask, I'm sorry for a little bit leading you onto this, because on January 18th, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that the Armenian authorities had violated Pashinyan's right to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and liberty and security during the 2008 incident, the March 1 riots. And we know that, basically Pashinyan controls our, human rights lawyers internationally. So we saw a lot of criticism that this is like a selective prosecution. In this case, a lot of opposition media were criticizing Armenian government for not prosecuting it strongly enough in ECHR.
Yeah, that you're totally right. How can people who were appointed by Pashinyan argument against him? That's ridiculous. So there were no arguments by Pashinyan's appointed people, the agent of Armenia before European Court of Human Rights. So there was no chance that the state win, no chance for that. And that decision, that the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, in fact, it's a new situation for ECHR itself, because I cannot remember any case that the person who is applicant in the case on the moment of the issuing of judgment is the head of government. There was no case of that. So I believe that this case is very vulnerable, let's say.
There is one point I want to address, because preservation of our monuments is very close to my heart, and we've had a couple of conversations about this on Grung podcast also. Armenia claimed that Azerbaijan violated the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. This is known as CERD, C-E-R-D, because the destruction of national heritage is a form of racial discrimination. Ruben, do you know if the ICJ decisions took this point into account?
As long as I remember, it did took into account.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would say that that's not very important, because there is no mechanism of implementation of that kind of decision.
Right.
Yeah, of enforcement and implementation. And politically, no big country, no big power is interested in pushing Azerbaijan to do that. Unfortunately, we cannot be sure that our cultural heritage should be preserved, because already, unfortunately, many Armenian cultural objects are destroyed, and
right.
Many of them we already have,
right.
Including, for example, Kanach Jamin, Shushi, and so on and so forth, and so many churches, other heritage, Khachkars, and so on. And so I don't believe that we can be sure that something will be changed.
Ruben, I wanted to ask your thoughts about the normalization of Turkish-Armenian relations. Specifically, as we know, on January 14th, the Turkish and Armenian special representatives met in Moscow for the first Turkish-Armenian normalization discussion. And Parliament Vice Speaker Ruben Melikyan met with Turkish diplomat Serdar Kılıç. Then all sides made positive comments and said they wanted to continue towards a comprehensive relations. And world powers put out statements commending the discussions. Can you share your thoughts about this process?
That's a very important topic. On one hand, all of us know that one day we should go to the normalization path with Turkey. We cannot avoid that. One day we should go that way. On the other hand, we know that right now Armenia is in very bad situation, both politically and psychologically, and on the sphere of internal issues. So right now our society is so divided in Armenia, so divided, and we are so weak that if we go now to a normalization process, we should lose as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because we are objectively weak. That's first. Second, the people who are running this process, that's my personal opinion, are not people who enough national dignity. They are people who, I think, believe that Armenia should not, for example, pursue the issue of Armenian genocide, and so on and so forth. So the people who cannot defend Armenian interests because they don't believe in Armenian interests, as, for example, I believe, and majority of our diaspora believes.
Well, Ruben, let me also add that the people that you are referring to are the people who lost the war to Turkey and Azerbaijan.
At least that, yeah. So they not only lost the war, but they, in our region, it's very important, the stance, how your neighbors behave towards you. Do they respect you, or they don't respect you?
Right.
That's very important in our region. One of my friends has coined very good phrase in Armenian. I would try to translate it to English. He says that մեր տարածաշրջանում միայն ձիգ ազգերը իրավունք ունեն ապրել. So only strong people have right to persist in this region, to live in this region. And that's because the mentality of the peoples who live in this region: Turks, Azerbaijanis, Persians, Iranians, and so on. So if our neighbors, even our enemies, don't respect our political leadership, and they don't respect that's for sure. All of us remember the language that Aliyev uses towards Nikol Pashinyan. Even people who don't like him, feel insulted by Ilham Aliyev's language,
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't respect you, you cannot have effective negotiations with them, So that's the worst time to start normalization process now. It's the worst time, and the worst people who can run that process.
Do you see any opportunities presenting to Armenia in this process at this point?
The only thing that is in our interest is just to be sure that this process will be postponed for a while, and new people should continue that,
Mm-hmm.
Even restart it, but not now, and not these people.
Okay.
Ruben, this is an interesting segue into the next topic that we wanted to cover, which is the constitutional changes. In April 2021, Pashinyan, in one of his speeches, disclosed that he wants to change the constitution to a presidential system. He made that a part of his party's platform in the June 2021 elections as well. And now it seems that the parliament has launched that process by creating a committee to develop recommendations for changes to the constitution. Of course, he now has clarified that maybe we don't need to change the constitution. Maybe we can change some of the laws. Nevertheless, the committee is in force and it's working. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about the current initiative to change the Armenian constitution? Is it really stemming from an earnest evaluation and a need to change the system of the country from a parliamentary to a semi-presidential one? Or is there more than meets the eye?
Well, unfortunately, we do not have the culture of respecting the constitution in our country. That's not an issue. That's not a political issue. That's more an issue of mentality. And one of our problems is that during these 30 years of independence, we were not able to build trust for different reasons. That's not very important now to discuss them. And constitutions were the documents which could be changed for political reasons. We saw that starting in not changing, but establishing the first constitution of 1995, when first president Levon Ter-Petrosyan had so much power according to that constitution. So it was semi-presidential, but many people described it as super presidential, and so on, and not only the next presidents as well. According to many specialists, changed the constitutional provisions because of political issues. The situation now is different because Turkish world, especially Aliyev, very openly say that they believe that normalization between our countries can be achieved only if Armenia change the constitution. This is a very subtle issue because our constitution is based on Declaration of Independence of 1990, August 23, which on its part is talking about the issue of Armenian genocide and also Artsakh issue. So what they want is to eliminate that link between the Armenian statehood and that national issues of Armenians all over the world. Artsakh issue and Armenian genocide issue, Haidat issue. So I'm afraid that this process, that the real reason of this process is eliminating the link between the constitution and Declaration of Independence. What about the presidential or semi-presidential or parliamentary system? Now I would say something that many people would not accept, but I'm ready to argument. We think that now we have a parliamentary system, but parliamentary system didn't come into force yet. Why? Because that system stems from the situation where no force in parliament has vast majority, let's say.
Right.
During this parliamentary system, which started in 2010, 2018, we didn't have that situation. One political force, which is Քաղաքացիական պայմանագիր civil contract, both according to 2018 and according to 2021 elections, had 2/3 of all the votes. So they can appoint president, they can change constitution, they can appoint independent officials, including human rights ombudsman, prosecutor general, and so on. So that's not logic of parliamentary system. We did not see that logic yet. So that I can say that the reason that people say that parliamentary system didn't work is that we didn't even see how it can or could work.
Right, I agree.
That's why I believe that the parliamentary system still should have a chance, and that's why I don't think that the argument that it didn't work is a fair one.
So, Ruben, you don't think that the parliamentary opposition can stop a harmful or short-sighted set of amendments to the Constitution?
They can do that, but not in parliament, but in the streets of Yerevan.
But they have, as far as I know, a civil contract has one vote short of what they need to make constitutional amendments without the opposition.
No. They have. They can start constitutional amendments. So they can start constitutional amendments, right. But the referendum should be done. So,
I see.
There are some provisions in Constitution which can be changed, can be amended by Parliament. But what they try to do is to amend the provisions which can be amended or changed only by the people of Armenia. Mm-hmm. So they have almost enough votes. You remember one of the opposition members announced that he is not opposition deputy anymore, and he's
Ishkhan Zakarian.
Independent.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that if we count also his vote, they have enough votes to start the amendment process. Mm-hmm. But the referendum should be taken, and that's why I say that the streets, because if the referendum started, the street, let's say the streets of Yerevan should be much more important than right now.
Ruben, I agree that you're right in that the streets will be important. Can you also cover how this process is going to go forward? Because there is now a committee, and there were a lot of complaints from opposition about the makeup of this council. Do you believe that this council is fairly balanced? And in general, how would you comment on the process? And what do you see so far in terms of the people on the council and some of the directions that it might go in?
It's not inclusive council, of course. It's not inclusive also because it's not possible to have an inclusive council. Okay, for example, if somebody approached me from civil contact and asked me to be in that council, I and many of people who believe the same way as me would reject. But of course, they didn't even try to invite, of course. So, as Martin Luther King described, it's a home divided, it's a house divided in Armenia right now. So it's impossible to have something inclusive in Armenia right now. It's composed totally by people who are either civil contact people or people who support them somehow. And what will be the next step? If they have that draft constitution, they will go to government will go to parliament, and parliament, if they have 2/3 of all the votes, which is totally possible, they can launch the referendum. I think the process will take months, if not 1 or 2 years. Also, we should remember that the previous process, which started in 2020, was not effective, and
it was cancelled, right?
It disbanded. That council, which was much or less balanced, there were people who were respected by legal community, at least legal community, not politicians, but respected professionals. We do not have respected professionals in this new composition of committee.
All right. Since 2016, Dr. Arman Tatoyan has been Armenia's ombudsman, its human rights defender. His term in office expires this month, in February 22. Tatoyan is highly popular in both Armenia and the diaspora, yet there have been frictions with the Pashinyan administration. Last week, the Civil Contract Party proposed and voted in First Deputy Justice Minister Christine Grigoryan as the incoming ombudsman. Ruben, you are a former ombudsman of Artsakh, so you are definitely an expert voice on this role. How do you assess Dr. Tatoyan's tenure as Armenia's HR defender and also his office's relationship with the current government?
Well, we, with Mr. Tatoyan, had a very good cooperation during 2.5 years when I held the office of Artsakh Human Rights Ombudsman. Arman Tatoyan is not only respected in Armenia and by Armenians, but also by many others, European institutions, and not only European institutions. And only one example can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
European institutions made Armenian Ombudsman institution as an example for both European and non-European countries. And about a dozen of human rights ombudsman's office of different countries, Eastern European countries, Northern African countries, came to Armenia to learn how to run the business, let's say, how to run that office. So Arman Tatoyan is well respected, not only by Armenians, and he is a renowned human rights expert and pivotal speaker on Armenian issues as well. He is a person who were able, it's very important, to make the theory of human rights issues and national issues are not opposing each other, but they support each other, not oppose each other. And that's a very important issue. Why? Because many people in Armenia believe that human rights are opposite to national issues. And many people who right now are in the sphere of human rights do not like national issues. Tatoyan proved that that's not the only way. You can have a strong human rights record and strong national record. The situation with the current government, what they did is very, let's say, Nicolas way they behaved. They have full control of parliament. They could make an ombudsman everyone. They could make an ombudsman of, for example, Lala Tatik, who were one of the iconic persons of personages of 18th revolutionary events. They could make ombudsman, for example, their political team members, and they decided to make an ombudsman a member of their political team, Christine Grigoryan. And I think that now we have the following situation. Until 23rd of February, we have the Human Rights Ombudsman of the Republic of Armenia. After that, we will have the Human Rights Ombudsman of Civil Contract.
That makes sense. So what can you tell us about Ms. Christine Grigoryan? Do you have any expectations out of her tenure as the new ombudsman?
I have no expectation. I know her. We worked together for a short period. You know, I don't want now to criticize her. I just can say the following. According to our law, human rights ombudsman should be, vast majority of Armenian people didn't know and don't know who is Christine Grigoryan.
By respected, I think the Armenian word for it is herinaka. It's not that we don't respect Christine Grigoryan. It's just like she was an unknown to us. Yeah.
That's what I say. In order to be respected, you should be known. So I don't say that people don't respect her because they know her. No, she's not known to be respected or disrespected. If you have human rights defender which is partied with current regime, you just can say that you don't have some institution that help civil society, help human rights in political issues. Okay, we can live with. We can live without human rights ombudsman. It's totally okay. But for Armenian, the renommee of Armenia is including the human rights issues. It's very bad choice for them. And I'm sorry, one additional issue.
Sure.
I'm totally sure that Christine Grigoryan will not pursue national issues, for example, the rights of Artsakh people population, the bordering villages, as Mr. Tatoyan did.
Yes.
It's not her mentality. She will not do that.
That is exactly what I want to actually say, that we have gotten used to an HR ombudsman in Armenia who stands for all Armenians. I mean, Tatoyan was there for Lebanese Armenians during the Beirut blast 2 years ago, right?
Exactly.
It was an amazing tenure, I thought.
Christina Grigoryan will enjoy her office. I want to make a prediction. They will give her a couple of issues to resolve. You will see a couple of issues that she will resolve, and they will PR it. See how Christina Grigoryan resolved a couple of issues. Maybe could be issues not dealt with political structure, and they will try to give credit. So civil contract will try to give credit her in the beginning of her tenure, but it will not take long. That fuel will not take long.
During her confirmation hearings, one of the questions that she refused to answer was whether the human rights of opposition candidates and opposition leaders were being violated by illegally detaining them for a long time, basically on trumped-up charges. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she basically refused to answer those questions. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. So she tried to maneuver and not answer the questions. She couldn't answer that questions. She is appointed, literally appointed by civil contract.
Yes.
Only members of civil contract took part in the ballot. No opposition member of parliament take part in that in her election, in her voting.
Ruben, did the opposition have its own candidate?
No. Opposition couldn't have their own candidate because everybody knows that civil contract votes unanimously. They went to the ballot room, and 60, I believe, 7 people voted the very same way. There was no reservation. There was no abstention. So they voted unanimously. So what would be a reason to nominate someone who definitely will not take votes? Now we do not have a situation where in civil contract are different factions. No, there are people who are totally under Nikol Pashinyan, and you remember last year's term that they themselves coined Usapark. So they behave as Usapark. So they do not behave as people who have their own will, their own dignity, their own face. That's just a number. That's not. They are not people who can be counted as different political persons. They are just number of deputies, of members of parliament. Kochak Sekhmov. That was the term that Nikol Pashinyan used for previous governments, but he perfected that institution, the institution of Kochak Sekhmovs.
After February, would you care to speculate where Arman Tatoyan's career is headed to? And I'll let you off without answering the question if you don't want to.
I would say what I would like to see
exactly
with Arman Tatoyan. Because we also had some personal relations as well, and that's not a secret that I would open now. I would like to see him in Armenian public sphere. I hope and I believe that we will see Arman Tatoyan in the Armenian public sphere, not necessarily political, but public, including human rights issues. And I hope that he will continue to participate in different discussions, including in human rights issues. Until Arman Tatoyan is a person who talks about human rights, his word will be much more weighty than the word of any appointee by civil contract in different positions, including human rights ombudsman. So I believe that Mr. Tatoyan will continue to be in public domain.
We talked a little bit about the opposition leaders issue, which Karine Grigoryan sidestepped, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper in that. Since the 44-day war ended in November 2020, the domestic politics of Armenia have been very unstable. Throughout 2021, opposition figures were harassed, jailed, and threatened with unending lawsuits. And we've seen some shady behind the scenes deals with the government associated entities that seem to be tended to hit at the opposition's financial resources. For example, I'm talking about the non-transparent deal of the Zangezur copper molybdenum combine, which now apparently the shares switched hands, and it seems that the government got some control of it, and even to the point of appointing Tigran Avinyan, formerly Deputy Prime Minister, as a leader in that organization.
As chairman,
also,
I think.
Also, while these degradations in the norms of democracy in Armenia were noted by international NGOs like Freedom House, it seems like they were mostly as a footnote in their reports. As a whole, they don't seem to have put a major dent in Armenia's reputation with the West. Just last week, in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, they voted for a resolution praising Armenia for making marked progress in democratic development since 2018. This was particularly scandalous because it ignored the opposition's vocal complaints about the issue of harassment and jailing of pro-opposition figures, not to mention anything else that we talked about, and ignored the European Ombudsman Institute's statement slamming Armenian public TV and the Armenian government for pursuing, I'm quoting, for pursuing a long-term policy of blocking and broadcasting of the human rights defender. So Ruben, is that assessment by us missing anything? And can you summarize your own state of the current affairs in Armenia in this space?
Well, this is also an issue where politics is blended with human rights issue. And politics is blended with human rights issue in very immoral way. Well, what I mean is that countries and institutions which champion human rights made us believe that human rights are universal, human rights have universal standards. And when we see that universal standards that were proclaimed, and that's mathematics, it's not something that we can just have different issues, different points of view. There's mathematical issues, so many violations. I will bring only one example. In 2003, Armenia became a member of European Convention on Human Rights, of Council of Europe, member of European family, because Armenia agreed with European demands. One of the most important demands was decriminalization of insult, of defamation, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 2021, civil contract recriminalized that offense, recriminalized. Again, that was the crime that only after decriminalization of that crime, the insulting. Only after decriminalization, Armenia, the doors of European Council were open for Armenia. And now the other political party comes, make it criminal, and we don't see that European institutions demand to stop it.
Yeah.
And now we see that hundreds of people are prosecuted under that infamous 137.1 article of criminal code. This is just an example. The example is self-evident that European institutions use human rights issues for bargaining with governments, and demanding in closed doors different deals. Geopolitical issues. And I believe that the cost of their silence is that the policy of the current government is against Armenian national interests. I believe that was the real reason. If one day we see, and which is I cannot imagine that, but if one day we see that civil contract pursue national interests of Armenia, you will see that next day Europeans and all that human rights community will remember that Armenia is violating different human rights issues and start to publish statements. So that's the core problem. Unfortunately, now we have a situation that European values are in distrust for many people in Armenia, and I don't see how the trust could be restored.
I also wanted to talk about the case of Ashot Minasyan, which we mentioned. Essentially, the most recent of the opposition issues started a week ago when Pashinyan's government initiated legal action to arrest a judge in Syunik, Boris Bakhshian, after he released the jailed opposition figure Ashot Minasyan. And he's not even, I don't know if we can even consider him an opposition figure, but Ashot Minasyan, also known as Ashot Yerkat, out on bail. Until this period, he was, I think officially he was held on charges of having illegal weapons. But, we can go into more details. Yeah, but Armenia's Prosecutor General Artur Davtyan would not say what the charges are against Bakhshian because of some need for secrecy. It's beyond any doubt. Like the persecution against Bakhshian started immediately after he released Ashot Minasyan. So this is, there can be, for me at least, a clearer example of politically motivated prosecution. And of course, Bakhshian claimed that the legal action against him is harassment and retribution for allowing an opposition-friendly figure, let's say, out of jail. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so it's very clear. It's very clear that there is a link between the two facts. So release of Ashot Yerkat, who is not, he's not political opposition person. He's national person. He's nationalistic person. Let's say he is a person who defended our homeland during first Artsakh war. Who was defending our homeland during 4 days war and defending our homeland with his sons, two sons, by him during 44 days war. And he is alive only by miracle, let's say. I know that he was in the most dangerous parts of the front, in the Hadrut part of the front. So anyway, Ashot Yerkat is very respected by, especially in Syunik. And the charges that were brought against him were, were political, let's say. So after Judge Boris Bakhshian, by the way, he was appointed after 2018. He's not a long-term judge, so he has only 2 years of term. So when people say that after revolution we start to make so Boris Bakhshian is one of the new appointed judges. He's not the old the judge that was appointed during the previous governments, during the Republican Party's government or previously. So that person just made what he believed is appropriate to do. And after that started prosecution, which is a very technical issue. If Boris Bakhshian is prosecuted for that issue, the judges who made decision on detention of 3 opposition members of parliament without any ground, they could not do that because according to Constitution, they had immunity. They should be hanged figuratively, let's say.
Right.
Yeah. So that's clearly political case, and clearly political case not only aimed towards Mr. Bakhshian, Judge Bakhshian, but towards other judges. That look, if you do something which is not liked by us, you can be not only prosecuted the next day, but also can be detained. You remember in 2019, the same thing happened with Judge David Grigoryan.
Yes.
After his decision on second president's release. But they didn't decide to go for his detention, you know. Yeah. Now, the cynicism was so high level that they even go after his detention. And they even appoint a judge to decide on his case, a person who officially was member of civil contract party, officially.
Yeah.
And I think that European institutions are co-responsible for what is happening now. And also, let's remember that came on immediately after the resolution in Europe in PACE, Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, which praised Armenia for democratic developments, So I think that's totally linked and connected.
I also want to talk about, in general, the state of civil liberties and freedoms. One of the most worrisome developments for us is the rapid introduction of new sort of freedom limiting legislation. You mentioned Article 137.1, which was introduced just last year, and it criminalizes defamation or anything seen as defamation. And at first glance, it seems to be enforced selectively. And recently, through your Facebook post, I learned that a criminal case was opened against an individual who shared content from Arm Comedy, which is, it's a satirical show on their Facebook profile. And the charge is severely insulting the prime minister. Can you talk more about this case and the phenomenon in general?
Well, that's very logical from the point of view of the regimes that tend to become totalitarian. They try to silence people who oppose them, and one of the ways of silencing them is to have the laws that criminalize insult or defamatory language. The problem with that laws is that you cannot draw the line between the two situations, the criminal and not criminal behavior. You cannot say where it starts to be criminalized, where the serious, the grave insult starts. Especially when we have videos that we just today discovered, the video from 2020. You remember there was a time that Nikol Pashinyan liked to go online by his Facebook page and talk for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. You remember the times.
Yes.
So during one of his monologues, he was talking about insults against him personally, and he's saying, okay, if people incite me, it's okay, because nobody pays attention on that. If people pay attention on that, then it would be a signal for us to go.
Right.
That's almost citation. Tomorrow we will publish it. Today, by the way, Para TV published that part of his speech. So the person who is publicly talking about being okay with insults towards him, and that's totally understandable for democratic societies. I'm sure that President Biden, other presidents of the United States, or heads of governments and states of European countries don't go after John, Peter, Paul, who live in their country, in their homes, and on their Facebook pages, Twitter pages, to use offensive language towards them, because you cannot fight that problem, fight that issue by law enforcement. The only way to fight that is to work properly as much as possible, not to be traitors, not to give your homeland to the enemies, not to send 5,000, young people to death. You need to just be a normal leader. And if you do what I described, you should expect that people will even insult you. It's very logical. Laws will not work, People will use fake profiles. People will use not direct language to insult people, and so on and so forth, and which is very important. Look, in every case where somebody is insulted, not Nikol Pashinyan, the first thing that our law enforcement bodies do is to bring that person into the process and give them the status of victim. But Nikol Pashinyan is never brought to the process and given the status of victim. Why? Because if he is brought to the process, he should be asked the question: do you think that this is a defamation? This is an insult towards you? And after that, the person who is the defendant can ask him questions. So they don't want to bring him into the process, and this is a nonsense from the point of view of Armenian legislation, because that's a crime. It's described a crime against a person. You see, so you cannot have a crime against person without that person included into the process. It's the very same when you have, for example, murder case without murdered people, a person designated as a murdered. is just ridiculous. It's just nonsense. So this article is used selectively. First, it's used selectively. Second, this article is used for silencing not the insults but criticism, because if in the very first period of time only cases were opened where the insulting words were used, now is, for example, the word taptapuk, which is not a term that is an insulting term in terms of Armenian mentality, Hayhoyank and Hayhoyank. I will use the word Hayhoyank. It's not Hayhoyank. It's definitely not Hayhoyank. Yes, it's word that is defamatory, but it's not Hayhoyank. So this article is used for silencing criticism, and which is very important. You know who presented this legislation into parliament? Can you guess?
Alexanian?
Simonian?
No. Christine Grigoryan, who is now
really?
who will be so this is really funny. So, that's the situation in Armenia now.
To add insult to injury, excuse my pun, Vagan Alexanian,
one of the members of parliament, right?
He called all of the opposition media political prostitutes, which I think is more more insulting than Taptapuk. But he has immunity, so there we go.
Yeah, that's the issue.
All right, we're gonna leave it there for today. We have so many more questions, Ruben, but we've kept you up long enough. And we thank you for taking the time to talk to us at the end of your day.
Thank you, Hovik. Thank you, Aspet. And I think that the topics that we discussed, one day we will have much more, a better situation to discuss better topics.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our program for this episode of Grung Weekend Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at grung.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Grung, or in our Facebook group, Grung-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.